So with that, we have one last panel. I know we're running late on time, but panel 4 consists of representatives of organizations that have interacted with the 911 system and with individuals that are affected by it. So with our next panel, if we can really be able to limit everybody's testimony to at least 5 minutes so we can move along quickly, I appreciate it. This panel we have Shelby Ryman, President of Calena 911. We have Emergency Medical Director, Association of California, Humberto Ochoa, Riverside County EMS Agency. We have Angelo Salvucci Jr., Medical Director, Santa Barbara County and Ventura County EMS Agencies. The Utility Reform Network, Regina Costa, Telecommunications Policy Director. Thank you very much for being here, and once again, if you could limit your comments to 5 minutes, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Shelby.
I'm Shelby, yeah. My name is Shelby Ryman, and I serve as the 2015 California Chapter President of the National Emergency Number Association. I'd like to thank the chair of this committee, Assemblymember Rodriguez, for the opportunity to address your committee today on the issue of how California can lead the nation by implementing necessary technology, infrastructure, and support state-of-the-art equipment capability for locating cell phone callers when they need to contact 911. It's been reported that less than 45% of over 1.5 million wireless calls made in California in March of 2013 delivered accurate data on the caller's location. There are many contributing factors to this alarming statistic, and explanations as to the how and the why are getting quite complex. The public's perception of 911 capabilities exceeds the technology currently available to most, if not all, 911 centers in California. Unfortunately, the public's expectation is the 911 dispatcher will know exactly where they are when they use their cell phone to call 911. 911 centers desperately try to reach this expectation, but in a large number of cases cannot. 911 centers nationwide are struggling to meet the public's expectation, and when attempting to do so are met with significant challenges. The first challenge is technology. 911 centers need the ability to access currently available hardware and software that will enhance the decision-making process for self-sector routing, which also includes training and personnel who can coordinate this process. The technology exists today. Accurate and complete data analysis will facilitate better routing decisions. Approximately 18 months ago, Calnina daylighted this issue, and at our urging, this is now a priority after many years of inaction. We concur with a special meeting before the May revisions and will continue to urge the State 911 Advisory Board to move forward with this issue. Challenge number 2 is obviously funding. Clearly, the current Setna funding model is not sustainable for existing operations, let alone for the next-gen 911. It's forecasted that in the fiscal year 16-17, the fund will not realize the amount of revenue that will be needed to keep pace with the necessary expenditures. The forecast does not include the issue of maintaining today's technology at the same time we implement the next generation 911 infrastructure and user equipment. A better solution that's been implemented in other states is a fee per device. Texas, for example, charges a monthly fee of 50 cents per mobile phone. This model would generate significant income and provide funding for next-gen 911. Challenge number 3 are standards and measures. We need a means of monitoring the network and call routing to ensure that sectors are assigned to the correct PSAPs and that the sectors are checked for accuracy on an ongoing basis. Calnina believes that developing a workflow that's mandated for all 911 program coordinators to follow is essential for a robust dynamic system. How one agency manages their 911 location issue can be completely different from the next, and until there's a standardized format of how to analyze this data, our system will remain status quo. How new cell towers are reported, how cell sectors are programmed, and in what time frame this occurs is vital to the integrity of our system. And challenge 4 is routing accuracy, and this has been discussed throughout the meeting today. We need to work closely with the wireless carriers to ensure they're delivering phase 2 location information at the start of the call. We can begin to accomplish this by reducing the time threshold to a maximum of 15 seconds for the routing of accurate caller location information to the public safety answering point on indoor and outdoor wireless 911 calls. Technology exists that should be utilized today. 30 seconds is way too long to wait for the accurate caller location information, especially if there is any hope of routing the wireless 911 calls to the correct PSAP. We need to eliminate the necessity to rebid to receive Phase 2 location information. When a Phase 1 wireless call comes in, the 911 dispatchers are forced to rebid the call in order to receive the Phase 2 location information. The PSAP should be receiving Phase 2 information on the inception of the call, and this process should not be the responsibility of the 911 dispatcher. 911 is an essential a component of daily life that is often taken for granted until it's needed. We need to urge the wireless service providers to make the necessary investments to deploy, maintain, and routinely update technology to ensure that accurate caller location information is delivered to the PSAP in a timely manner on every wireless 911 call, indoor, outdoor, and including the horizontal location information. I would like to thank the committee for their time and attention to this critical issue of public safety.
Thank you, Shelby. I appreciate your comments. Our next speaker, we have Angelo Salvucci, Jr.
Thank you. I'm actually going to represent Dr. Ochoa as well, so I may go a little bit over the 5 minutes because I'm going to have two portions of this. The first portion, I'm going to be representing the California chapter of the American College of Emergency Physicians and the EMS Medical Directors Association of California. I'm the medical director of Ventura County and Santa Barbara County Emergency Medical Services and a practicing emergency physician. I want to just state once and finally what others have, that seconds and certainly minutes count. And Mr. Rodriguez, I know I'm not telling you anything there. You know probably better than I that patients die when they have serious medical problems in under a minute, and that's a significant problem. The medical literature documents that a minute's delay in serious medical illnesses reduces the likelihood of survival by 10 to 17%. If you multiply that times the number of calls that are delayed by that amount because they're first answered by a PSAP that cannot dispatch emergency responders, there are hundreds to thousands of Californians that are dying every year because of this problem. And that brings me to issue number 2, which is we have a large number of really good people working in a system that has failed them. You've probably all heard about the chain of survival. There are multiple actions that have to be taken to save someone's life when they have a serious medical illness. And the first is dialing 911 and getting emergency responders there. That link is broken in California. We have good people. We have dispatchers, EMTs, firefighters, paramedics that are ready to respond, sitting on their hands, waiting for a 911 call to eventually get routed to a place that can send them. Every time, I want to disagree with my colleague Scott Howland on the characterization of a misroute. From the patient's perspective, if your 911 call is answered by someone whose only function is to transfer it, that, from your lens, is a misroute. It may not be technically a misroute by our characterization, but from the patient whose we are supposed to be serving, that's a misroute. And that there are thousands of those that occur every day. I want to also make it clear about the impact of the FCC ruling. I submitted testimony twice. I visited the FCC about the issue that resulted in their most recent ruling. And I want to first say that Mr. White's characterization of the number of indoor calls that must be located within a certain geographic area was overstated. In fact, the FCC allows the carriers to use a blend of indoor and outdoor when they're using their location standards, so that as few as 15% of indoor calls can be located and meet the standards of 40, 60, and 80% that Mr. White had mentioned. There are a number of other ways that those standards can be delayed or, in fact, not met. And maybe most importantly is and he mentioned this as well, the number of seconds it takes, the time it takes to locate a person in order to be able to route the call to the correct PSAP is 2 to 3 to 4 seconds, but carriers are allowed 30 seconds by the most recent ruling. So in the foreseeable future, we are not going to have location-based routing. That's a really important part. It's not a couple of years from now. It's not 5 or 6 years from now. It's a decade or more from now until the FCC gets around to requiring location-based routing as a standard for carriers. So in the meantime, what are we going to do? We have a solution. We've had a solution since 2008 when the RED project was first started. The RED project, as you've heard, looks at historical data and is able to determine which PSAP, a certain area, a certain cell sector, would be most appropriate to route calls to. And you heard Mr. Howland again talk about the importance of using historical data to guide future routing. Now, I have some concerns about the transfer method that he mentioned. Number one is there are good transfers and there are bad transfers. The good transfer is when somebody has a cardiac arrest on the freeway. The CHP will respond. They'll transfer that call to a local PSAP to get emergency medical dispatch CPR instructions. There's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly good. It wasn't misrouted. The bad transfer is when that call occurs in downtown Santa Barbara, and the CHP has no responsibility for responding to the call. So the transfer method doesn't distinguish between those two. It's a transfer. The second is you played a video. The video showed a woman who drowned. That call was never transferred. So that call was invisible to the transfer method. So we would be proposing using a method that wouldn't address the very issue that you started this hearing with, which is if you abandon the call, if you drop the call, if there's a hang-up, that won't be a transfer and won't be recognized as a misrouted call. The second and third caller who can provide additional information are often not transferred. It's the response is often we've already been notified of that emergency. But a trained dispatcher in a local area, and especially somebody who knows emergency medical dispatch, might have use for those. So there are a number of weaknesses, and I would strongly encourage that the RED project, which worked, which received awards, and which could be continued tomorrow, and by the way is the only project that could be continued tomorrow, be seriously considered. So our organizations strongly recommend that the RED project be continued. I heard Ms. Wong talk about it taking 8 years. Then I think later she corrected to 3 years. That could be significant less. The reason why it takes 3 years is every one of those towers requires a discussion. Those discussions can be truncated. The technology doesn't take 3 years. Secondly, I want to speak as a practicing emergency physician and as a manager of 2 emergency medical services systems. I have great concerns about the process with which this has been brought to the table. The public hires us to do our job, and I don't think we've done our job. In February of 2013, I wrote to Assemblymember Williams, and I'm sorry he's not here, I've been in his hair since then, about this issue, and I said that my patients were dying because of this misroute problem and that patients weren't being located and that callers were not getting to the place they needed to be. He spoke to Ms. Wong, was assured everything, in fact, was okay. In January of 2014, one of those patients died, and it was clear to everyone that that patient died as a result of a misrouted call. And we then I asked the president of CalNINA, I wanted to explain to the family, why did this happen? So the president of CalNINA asked Ms. Wong for information about that call and was told that the government code did not require them to provide that information. It was not in the public interest. About a year ago, Ms. Wong met with Das Williams, and she said that the wireless optimization service, based on the RED project, was in fact something of value, and she would do whatever she could to get it done. The only barrier was finances. Since then, I've written to her 3 times. I've attended a 911 advisory committee meeting, and I've not heard from her at all. What I did learn at that meeting, however, is that there is no organized way to know when towers are coming up. that there is no good way to know where calls are routed, and that the way that these misroutes are managed is to expect a dispatcher to write down and complete a misroute form. Thousands of times a day this is occurring. Dispatchers are busy. They're not going to do it. They're not the quality assurance person for the state 911 system. Further, you heard about the Santa Barbara Fire Chiefs. Santa Barbara Fire Chiefs wanted information to know what was going on in my county, in Santa Barbara County. They were given, 2 months later, a list of calls that had no addresses and no transfer location. It's meaningless information. Again, came from the same attorney that said that it wasn't in the public interest to be furnishing that information. So what we know now is that 90% of the cell sectors have not been examined. There's no process to know when new ones appear, that misroutes are not reported, and little or no information is shared when local jurisdictions ask. So I have to say, I'm hired by 2 EMS systems to run them. If those EMS systems were run the way I'm seeing the 911 program office, and if I behaved in that way, then my county board of supervisors would have me appear here in the next section, in the public comments section, as the former EMS medical director. So I'm going to suggest finally that AB 510 be amended to say that the evaluation should be of the OES 911 program, not by the OES 911 program, because we need some action. 3 years could have started 2 years ago. By the end of this year, we could have every single cell sector in California have been examined and in a maintenance phase, and we would know exactly where all the calls were going. So this 3 years from now is kind of a red herring. And I'm going to close by saying we can do a lot better for our public.